Yeah, of course. So we were started to start BOK after our freshman year.
Hello and welcome to the first ever BLK podcast. My name is Iwo Casadarj. I am an equity research analyst in the emerging market sector. Me and Robert will be hosting today's episode. Just as a disclaimer, the opinions stated on this podcast are of the analysts and the guests and do not represent BLK or its sponsors. Without further ado, Robert will introduce our guest.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robert Eatman, and I'm also an equity research analyst in the real estate sector. For today's episode, we'd like to welcome Angel Onuoha. Angel is one of the original founders of BOK and is a senior at Harvard College studying economics with a secondary in psychology and computer science. He is also the founder and CEO of Zuvy, an iOS app that allows college students to get paid for freelance work on their campus, and is an incoming associate product manager at Google. So, on behalf of both of us, I'd just like to say thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I feel like you're like a keystone to our podcast because we'd have Seven on, and we're gonna get Rachel on as well, who's the current president. And it's only appropriate that we get you.
Honored to be here. I'm very glad that you guys are doing this as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, do you want to explain to people what inspired you to start BLK? And how would you explain to someone like what BLK is who hasn't even heard of finance before?
Yeah, of course. So we were started to start BLK after our freshman year. So it was myself along with two other co-founders, one of them at Harvard and one at Princeton. And one of the things that we noticed was that we joined a lot of our early clubs on campus, different investment clubs. And we noticed that there's just a large missing representation of Black students. It didn't seem like a lot of the Black students were interested in joining those clubs, even though, Black students didn't seem to be any less interested than anybody else in the financial services sector. And so we asked a lot of students around campus that we knew were interested in finance that were African-American or Black, just, why they didn't choose to come to these clubs. And a lot of them gave reasons that we thought we wanted to start an organization to change. And so some of those reasons were things like, I don't feel comfortable being one of the only African-American or Black students in the room. I feel a little bit behind because all these students are so educated and I haven't really done much in finance before. All these different types of things. And so it just made sense to start the organization, thinking about all the historical barriers that have kept Black people away from participating in the financial services sector. It seems like a very natural sort of consequence that Black people might be either less interested in joining the financial services sector or just know less about it. And so, that's basically a major reason why we decided to start BOK. And then if I had to describe what it was to someone who's never heard of finance, I would say it's a nonprofit that teaches African Americans or Black students, college students, how to invest and the importance of basically, saving, investing, and financial literacy.
No, I feel like that's a really good explanation, and it's amazing how this whole mission has manifested into what it is now, being one of the biggest financial literacy programs. I mean, for university students at least. So yeah, it's great what you've done. So were there any early woes that you guys had, or troubles or roadblocks that you were dealing with when creating BLK?
So I think there's not many huge troubles. I think the only probably trouble that we had was locking down some of the sponsors. And so for those people listening who aren't too familiar with what that means, the way that BLK Capital Management works is that we partner with a bunch of organizations on Wall Street, for example, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, these large corporations. And then, they allow us to help our students with full-time or internship opportunities and also help a little bit with the education as well. And so, creating those partnerships was very difficult because we didn't have too many connections in the financial services space or really know how to, reach out to these companies. And so it was really just massive cold emails and cold calling. I think at the beginning onset, I cold called over 100 different firms and probably got no's from 99 of them. But Bank of America was the first one to say yes. And I think that was the only thing that we needed to really, unlock a new wave of sponsors to come in. So that was probably the hardest part about forming the organization.
Just getting like the sponsors to understand the goal and the mission.
Absolutely. And for
Yeah.
a lot of them, it was a very new program. So, it's hard to take a chance on something that some students just came up with, right? Especially because we didn't have much traction or even many students as a part of the organization at the time.
To move on with the questions, I'd actually like to go back and mainly focus on your path to financial services. So, how did you find out about the industry, and what exactly got you interested or sparked your passion to start BOK or encourage other Black students to start a career or pursue a career within the industry?
Yeah, so actually, I became interested in finance when I was about to enter into high school or into college. I originally thought throughout my high school career that I wanted to do pre med, and I felt like I was doing it for a lot of the wrong reasons. My mom is very Nigerian, and so just very much pushed me into becoming a doctor. But I started to realize things that I was passionate a bit more, and I was really intrigued by the idea that money could compound upon itself and to make money. And so I started looking into investing and to really understand what is the underpinnings of what it means to invest, and also what the importance of it is. I think no matter what career that you have, it's imperative that you need to have financial literacy, because that will seep into every single aspect of your life. And so I thought finance would be a great starting point. And so I came into college. I did a few different investment banking internships. I did a private equity internship. And after that first internship, after my freshman year, I really noticed a lot of the discrepancy of color of the people in the actual workforce itself. That during my freshman year, I noticed it on campus, but then when I actually joined the workforce, I also noticed it there. And that was a big impetus for starting the program. But yeah, and so I think the main idea there was, okay, if we can, teach students financial literacy skills, even if they don't want to go into finance, they'll at least be able to use those skills to be able to build generational wealth for themselves and their families once they graduate. And so that's why we try to start at the college level, because we really think it's a nascent time in people's lives before they start to go and start a real career.
Responding on to what you said, I do feel it's very important. I do especially feel as a person who is not adequately taught on the K-12 level. So I do feel it's very important, and it's definitely a very good thing that you're doing, spreading financial literacy to your peers. Elo, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I mean, in regards to your financial interests, I mean, like, how did that manifest in the beginning? Were you just like exploring like these clubs and like insight programs, or like what were you doing when you first got interested in finance?
Yeah, I think I did a lot of the things that normal people will do, right? So I talked to a lot of the upperclassmen in my school, and I basically asked them, hey, what types of clubs did you join to get to where you are? I saw that a lot of them would work at Goldman Sachs or all these different big banks, and sort of wanted that to be me one day. And so I joined a lot of the investment clubs on campus. I joined, just different, Slack channel. I don't even know if I was using Slack then. I just sort of joined a lot of like different group me channels around people talking about the market, just to sort of immerse myself in the space and try to learn more. But most of the people I was learning from and with did not look like me. And so it was definitely a lot harder to come from more of a disadvantaged background, and not be able to speak to as many people that could relate to sort of my culture, where I was coming from, how I was viewing the market, all those different types of things. So I think that's what's so special about being Black, is that there is a sense of pride and culture and sense of mutual understanding that we have amongst each other. And I think that when you can learn amongst a group of people that are very similar to you and come from similar backgrounds, then it's a lot easier to sort of have like a lot of that community.
Definitely, and I think that's like one of the greatest things about BOK as well, because you're immersing yourself in like this financial world, and it's like people who have like similar interests, similar backgrounds, similar ethnicities. It just makes it more immersive, I feel like. So that's really great.
Um,
Um,
so
yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So, so in the previous answers to the questions, I heard that you mentioned some of your internship experiences, for example, with Goldman Sachs and other investment banks. So, given the recent events that's happened with the survey that was sent out talking about work-life balance and the pandemic, did you feel that you experienced some of the aspects that were shown? And do you also feel that the industry will respond to potential change demand or what these analysts are saying in their experiences?
No, I definitely experienced it. I think that almost every intern, especially those in the investment bank division, will see a very clear lack of work life balance. I think that it's very tough. That was one of the things that I think you know big pieces of feedback that I had about the culture there, and I think that's something that they're also actively working on, which is why they partner with organizations like ours because they want to bring more diversity into the workspace. And I think that diversity goes way farther than just the color of skin that people have, but it's also the diversity of opinions, right? And so I think what you'll see is that as these workspaces become more diverse and you have a lot more people bringing a lot more sense of opinions about what they want into workspace, you won't have these very toxic cultures of people needing to stay till 3 a.m. Just to be in the office and working, or all these other things that you've typically seen in the past at banks. So I'm not too familiar with the survey that came out, but I can probably assume people just said that they were working too long and didn't feel like they had a good work life balance. And so, yeah, I would just say that definitely needs to change.
But you've personally like interned at I believe it's Blackstone and Goldman Sachs and Advert. So like a bunch of these big firms. And what was your experience like as you were interning there?
Yeah, are you talking about experience from the sense of work life balance, or maybe just the work itself, or just experience in general?
Yeah, just the experience in general, like you being, an African American starting BLK, what was your mindset going into it, and like how were you interacting with people there, and yeah.
I loved a lot of the internships. I think that they do a very good job of making sure that you have some mentorship and support throughout your internship. It's a bit better at some of the smaller places rather than the larger places. But even so, I think at each internship that I've had, I've gotten good access to sort of the senior members on the team, being able to talk to a lot of kids, especially other interns as well, meet them, figure out their paths, learn more about them. And so I think that all those internships have definitely been very positive experiences, particularly the Advent International internship. I was actually doing that while attending school. So I was doing that throughout my entire junior year. And I think that was just great, particularly from just the type of work that I was doing. And also, they actually created the internship for myself because they hadn't had an internship before. And so it was really cool to be able to form sort of the early stages of what their internship program is going to look like. And then, now they take interns every single year.
That's cool. So you were just paving the way for Advent then. That's really cool. So you're still like an active member within BLK as well. Like you still send in the occasional Slack messages and stuff. So what is your role now? As I mean, we already established you are the co-founder, but there is an executive board and everything. So how would you define your role in BLK like momentarily?
Yeah, I think my role within BLK for now will probably be my role forever, or as long as I'm alive or the organization exists. And it's really just sort of a mentorship capacity role. So we have different presidents coming through, and they pretty much run the day to day and own the organization. But I think it's very helpful for myself as someone who has seen multiple years of generations come past, seen things that have worked and also that have not worked, to be able to just give some old advice, help where I can, and also maybe give some suggestions here or there.
And you've recently started an interesting fellowship program for people who are interested in finance as well. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I started the Onuoha Fellowship. It is a 4-year scholarship program, and essentially, it's the reason I started it was because I remember when I came into college, I didn't really have too many former resources or too many big networks of people that I came in that I also knew were interested in something. And so, I felt like I was very entrepreneurial at a young age, but all the money that I had was basically going towards trying to afford books or, other things that I directly needed for school. And so it's really just a program to provide more resources and financial support to, high school seniors that are entering into college and are interested in entrepreneurship. So we just did our first cohort this year. Essentially, we just had monthly meetings where we talked about different lessons in entrepreneurship, did some, cool activities, met people, but it's really mostly about building a network for themselves. And so I think one of the things that I'm excited for the program is having multiple cohorts, people being close to each other, developing mentorships, helping each other and relying on each other for job and internship search, all those cool things that you wouldn't get if you were just coming into college and not really knowing anybody.
And how does this application work, and how are our applications open now, and how are people able to apply?
Yeah, so the application is for Black high school seniors in high school right now, and it actually closes on April 30th. So, it's probably a bit over a week right now. But yeah, the application is right on the website, BOK Capital Management /Onuoha Fellowship. But yeah, so that's basically how people can apply. It's just a short Google form.
So I do have one question regarding where BOK or where you're planning to take BOK in the future. So it's evident. So we know about the foundation of the organization, and from at least our experience, the organization is doing very well. But what are you looking for the organization moving forward? What prospects do you have, or what are you interested in the organization developing as we move forward?
I think the most immediate thing that we're looking forward to is really building out a strong alumni base. I think, it very much makes sense that we started at the college level. Like we said before, we believe it's a very nascent time in people's lives where they're really developing a lot of the educational skills that they're going to use for their full-time workforce. But I don't think it makes sense for the community to just stop once you leave college, right? Because now you might be leaving college, going into a new space, let's say moving to New York or Chicago, and you might not know anybody there, right? Because you haven't come from a place where a ton of people move there. It'd be great if you could have your BLK community also there, people who are working similar jobs or people who at least have gone through a similar program that you're already familiar with and understand, some of your background. So I think that's the biggest thing there is establishing the alumni base for job opportunities, for community, and just for, general knowing each other and advice and help and things like that.
Yeah. And there was also another fellowship that you recently just were a part of as well. I believe it's called the Kenya Perkins Product Fellowship. Do you want to talk about Clarence Perkins? Excuse me. Yeah. Do you want to just talk about like what that is and how you also got into like the product management space as you transitioned from finance?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with how I got into product management because I think it's a little bit more along the lines of how I got to the Kleiner Perkins Fellowship Program. So after I joined my after I did my junior year summer internship at Blackstone, I sort of realized that working in finance particularly wasn't something I was interested in. I think I was more interested in finance from the perspective of personal finance, and so personal investing, and then also teaching that because I think it's just such an important skill, as I mentioned before, for anybody to have, no matter what industry that you're going into. And so I sort of looked at myself in the mirror. I had this job offer to return to a great job, absolutely a great job. But I realized it just wasn't something that I was that interested in. So I took a year off from school and I started a company, which was Zuvy. You guys mentioned it before. It was essentially an app that allowed freelancers to get paid on campus. So, for example, if you're a photographer, you want some people to book your shoots, you can create a business account on Zuvy, and then people can figure out you. So they can sort of like look through your portfolio, they can hire you, and then you can book a studio session on campus. So that obviously was a horrible business to be starting during Corona, during COVID-19. So I started it during around September 2019, and then COVID happened around March 2020. Earlier than March 2020, but essentially March 2020, all the students got kicked out from campus. That directly affected my business, so I ended up having to shut that down. But one of the things that I realized from that was that there were so many cool things that I was doing as a founder, especially just a solo founder, that I thought I wanted to continue in whatever job that I was looking for. And so, for example, as a founder, I realized, okay, not only was I doing some of the basically all the engineering for this app, but I was also doing design work. I was also doing the marketing for the app, right? Like running the Instagram and social media pages. I was also doing like hiring in terms of looking at different students that I want to potentially work with, right? My finger was in so many different places that I thought that was just a super interesting job to have. And so when I was essentially, that got shut down and I was essentially looking for a job, I was like, what type of job can I get that's sort of similar to being a founder where I can at least, do something very different on a day-to-day basis. And that was when I learned about product management. I actually didn't even know what it was before, but I sort of looked it up and I saw that product managers are sort of sit in the in between design, engineering, and the business fundamentals. And so I was like, wow, this looks very cool. It's something that it seems I can sort of be the CEO of my own product, but just at like a much smaller level at a larger company. And so I started the recruiting process. I got a job offer at Google, accepted that, and then the Kleiner Perkins Fellowship in particular is a summer internship opportunity where you work for one of Kleiner Perkins' portfolio companies, and then you join this fellowship program. And it hasn't started yet, but it's supposed to have just a ton of great resources, intros to a ton of amazing people, and also a great community of people who are also interested in product management, engineering, and design.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, and I believe like you yourself also know how to code in like several different languages. So does knowing how to code help you in like this whole scheme of product management?
Yeah, I think this is a very debatable topic. I personally would say that it does a lot because as a product manager, you need to basically understand the timelines of when things are built. And so one could possibly say that you could do that without knowing how to code. And obviously there has been many cases that has shown to be true. So for example, the rotational product management program at Facebook doesn't require any sort of computer science knowledge. At Google, it's very the opposite. They very much do require a technical background, and they also will test you. They have a whole technical interview for it. And I think the reason for that is because, for one, it's a bit easier to work with engineers if you can understand their language and be able to sort of clearly explain what you're trying to do at a very complex level without sort of needing a middleman. And then for two, I think you just generally have a better understanding of how long things have taken or how long things will take if you have done something similar to them as well. So, for example, if you're a product manager and you're saying, okay, I want to build in like a friend request feature, right? If you've built an app before and you've built a friend request feature, you'll understand how long it took you to do it, right? And you'll understand all the different necessary components. And you may say, okay, these are the different APIs that we need to plug in, or these are the different XYZ that needs to happen to get that done, right? But if you don't have that technical background, then you won't understand any of that. And you won't understand any of that. And so not to say that it can't be done, but you'll probably have to do a ton of additional research to figure out, okay, what does it mean to like plug in an API? What does it mean to, do all these different types of things? And there's a lot of things that happen in tech that I think, aren't as intuitive as they may seem. So something like a friend request feature or a chat feature may seem like it could just be plugged in a couple of days, but, it could end up taking multiple hours or even weeks, trying to understand how the app is currently built and what type of features that it could support. So I personally would say that I think it helps very much, but I wouldn't say anything in this world necessarily requires anything else, right? Because everything can be learned at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So I wanted to ask like one final question. Unfortunately, this may be our last question for the session. But I realize, like, with everything that you're doing with BOK, startup internships, everything, it's evident that you're a very busy person. So, what advice would you give to students coming into college, particularly Black students, on figuring out what they want to do for their career, time management, and using that in order to be a more successful individual?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, I think there's a few things. there's a few different parts of that question. The first is figuring out what you want to do for your career. I think there are several different ways that you can try to figure this out. It took me a very long time because I was very close-minded when I came into college. And so the biggest advice that I'd have for students of color coming into college is to very much keep an open mind. If you know or think that you want to do something, try other things as well as try doing that thing just to make sure that you really want to do that thing. So, for example, when I came into college, I told myself I really want to do investment banking, and that's the end all be all. And so I did investment banking my first summer. I did investment banking my next summer. And then once I was finally at sort of the top investment bank or one of the top investment banks, I was like, wow, this actually doesn't seem like what I want to do. And then I moved on to private equity, right? And so, I'm very lucky that I figured that out earlier in my career rather than later, and I still had time to transition. But had I kept that mindset, I could have gotten to my full-time job, figured out that's not what I wanted to do, and then been in a little bit more of a precarious situation. And so, I think looking back, one of the things I wish I did was if I knew I wanted to do investment banking, maybe my first summer I'd try consulting, maybe the next summer I'd try a tech internship, and then maybe my third summer I'd do investment banking, right? Or just something along those lines. And then I think in terms of time management, I would urge people to spend less time on social media. I think that's the biggest piece of advice I could probably give to young kids, particularly because almost everybody is on Instagram, Twitter, all of these things, and it'll suck away 3-4 hours of your day, literally just sitting there and scrolling. I think I actually recently just deleted my stuff for like the past 4 months just to really focus on being present where I was, and trying to learn new things and read books and stuff like that. And I just think that when you are able to significantly reduce the amount of time that you do spend on those channels, you'll find that you'll have so much time left in your day. And not only time left in your day, but also you'll find that your brain is a little less cluttered just with information and, like all these little dopamine hits that you get from getting likes on your, Instagram posts or seeing other people get likes. I think it's a very detrimental thing that young kids face. And I think it can be a very productive force if it's used in the right ways. So that's probably the biggest advice on time management. I forgot the third question that you asked, or the third part of the question.
Oh, sure. The question was more relating to, I think you answered it earlier, but it was more relating to what you would want to do with more your talents and interests and advice you would give moving forward. So.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think that was my pretty comprehensive answer for that.
Well, I mean, we don't want to take up too much of your time, but thank you so much for joining us. This has really been a pleasure. Thank you for starting BLK and allowing this podcast to, be where it is today, because, without you, I don't think we would have started this. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for starting the podcast. I think it's very important that a lot of these different stories are told and brought to the public. So it's so great that you guys took the initiative to do it.